Well, since 1971, it's been 500. Can you believe that? And I'm going to show you how it's possible because that's what the talk is about tonight or this morning. It's about writing. Now, in talking about writing, this is wonderful for me to do this. I am not talking about my own research. I'm not talking about our books, our publications, our new discoveries. I'm talking about the research of other people. And I love this research because it has made my life better. And it is my way of thanking the scholars who have done this research, and I hope it will help other people as much as it has helped me. First, a word of thanks. I had trouble um, tuning into this, making the connection. I am not very good at technology, but my
But my
colleague who is here, Nishan Ashtari, who is my co-worker in many ways, has solved it by telling me to turn on Chrome. I have to remind myself every morning to turn on Chrome. So we thank her for her technical competence. Okay, we're going to talk about academic writing. Let me tell you the most interesting fact first. More writing does not mean better writing. It will not help you or your students or your friends to write more. That will not make them better writers. It won't improve their form. It won't improve their spelling. It won't improve their punctuation. That all comes from somewhere else. It comes from reading. Writing itself doesn't help you do that. Now, writing does something else, though. Writing does something very, very different. Writing does something wonderful. Writing can make you smarter. When you write something down, you reread it, you look at it, and you realize you could make it better. You could come up with a better idea. A colleague has said it very well. In writing, meaning is not what you start out with, but what you end up with. As you go from draft to draft, you come up with better ideas. This is called the composing process. The composing process has been the triumph, the victory of the writing profession in the second half of the last century. This is research done in the United States, and we really honor it tonight and thank them for their help. The composing process that I will describe to you, and this is my categorization, has four components to it. Component number one, revision. I have reached the point when I have to revise. I'm happy because it means I'm learning something new. I'm going to say that again and again throughout this hour. Neil Simon, famous North American playwright, brilliant playwright, he said it very well. Mediocre writers write, good writers rewrite. All day long, I'm rewriting. That's all I do. That's most of my time. And that's how we get better. Kurt Vonnegut, famous author, he says, writing allows even a stupid person to seem halfway intelligent. If only that person will write the same thought over and over, improving it just a little bit each time. It's like inflating a blimp with a bicycle pump. Anybody can do it. All it takes is time. I'm now going to give you my absolute favorite quote from all these writers and experts. And believe it or not, it's the one that has done me the most good. It has put me on the road to successful writing, I think. It comes from Ernest Hemingway. A very simple sentence. The first draft of anything is shit. The first draft of anything is shit. This has helped me so much getting started in writing. You get the first draft done and you can revise it and come up with better ideas. And that's always been the hardest for me, trying to do the first draft. Well, that's the first part of the composing process, the power of revision. Revision is what does it. The second part, these all work together. Plan. Have a plan in advance. but make sure the plan is flexible. You can change the plan and it's good. Good writers nearly always have a plan when they start. It may not be the kind of plan we learn to do in school. This comes here, this comes there, but it is some kind of plan. The problem, though, is over planning. Once people make a plan, once you go to the trouble of making a plan, you don't want to change it.
Don't hit the frog.
The progress comes when you change the plan. When you have a plan and it's too rigid, you get another idea and you're annoyed. I want to finish. No, be happy. Changing the plan is important progress. Number 3, the third component of the composing process. Number 1, revision. Number 2, planning but flexible plans. Number 3, reread. Ernest Hemingway. I rise at first with light, and I start by rereading and editing everything I have finished to the point I left off. Reread the plan and you will find new ideas. You will discover them as you reread. Number 4, and this is something nearly all writing experts say, and it is correct. Delay editing. Don't worry about spelling. Don't worry about punctuation when you're writing. If you do that, you won't be thinking about the meaning, about the form. Get all your ideas right. And for me, that can be 20 drafts. And I never think about spelling or grammar. I just write what comes out. Then when you get your ideas clear, you can go back and edit it. A famous saying, don't put on your makeup before you take your shower. Wait till the end. Same idea. I want to go back to this planning idea and start giving you some examples of this. And I'm going to use my own case. I profited so much from the examples from others. I'll try to contribute my own. I was on an airplane going from Los Angeles to Hong Kong. It's kind of a long flight. It's about 12, 13 hours. And I was very happy with myself. I was going to a conference in Hong Kong on second language acquisition, and we had to turn in a paper when we finished, and I was done. I finished the paper before I got on the airplane. Wow, I could just sit, relax, read a book. There were 3 movies I could watch that looked good, comedies, action movies, great. So I sat down, relaxed, and another passenger came on after me. I was sitting in the aisle seat. I got lucky. This passenger was sitting in the middle. And let me tell you, it was a nightmare. He looked like a criminal. He looked like he had just
आवाज
escaped from
सही है
prison.
जफर
He looked like he had
आवाज
just escaped. Excuse me, we're getting interference here. He looked like he had just escaped from prison, and he had shot all the guards on the way out. He sat down next to me and looked very, very tough and very masculine. So I tried to be tough and masculine. I'm not very good at that. And then he fell asleep on my shoulder. 13-hour flight, and here's this guy next to me on my shoulder. So I did the only thing possible. I got up, I took my computer, and in every international flight, there's a place where you can get snacks. Coca-Cola, um, potato chips, a balanced diet. So I did that. I got my book out, I got my paper out, and I started to look at it again. I told you I had already finished it, but I took advice from Peter Elbow. I just I discovered so many interesting ideas when I tried to re-outline my paper. I thought it was finished. It wasn't. This taught me that Peter Elbow was right. You need to revise. You need to do an outline and then Look at the outline again. After you've written the paper, you'll find new things. So these are the four principles. I'll have a lot more to say. Revision is where it happens. When we have to revise, it means you are discovering new things. Be flexible. Be willing to change your draft. Reread what you've written before. Delay editing. I have a confession to make. In preparing for this talk, I decided to go over the outline a few times. And of course, I revised it and revised it. And then last night, I decided to reread a paper I wrote on this topic. As I read it, I found mistakes. What you've just received, some of you have received, is a revision and a revision and a revision. Vonnegut was right. You revise over and over again. Well, the problem is, this all seems nice, but we run into writer's blocks. Writer's block is the story of my life. All day long are writer's blocks. And I think I have an idea as to how to cure them. I've added an additional element to the composing process. Let's call this number 5, incubation. This was discovered or written about by a guy named Graham Wallas, Wallas, who wrote a book called The Art of Thought in 1926. This book is amazing. It has taught me so much. I found a copy in a university library, and this is before we had all these fancy computers, and I Xeroxed the entire book right there, having put coins in the machine, and it was worth it. Wallace says, problem solving requires an interval free from conscious thought to allow the free working of the subconscious mind. I have found this to be an extremely valuable part of the composing process. Depend on incubation. When you get stuck, stop. Let your subconscious mind take over. A great mathematician named Poincaré came to the same conclusion. Poincaré wrote an article on creativity, which is in every single collection of articles. It's quite brilliant. He was a mathematician. He worked in non-Euclidean geometry, and his work was very important to Albert Einstein in the theory of relativity. He also said this. He said there must be a preliminary period of conscious work which also precedes all fruitful unconscious labor. We're talking about the unconscious labor. He talked about his work in mathematics. He said, when I get into a problem in mathematics, and it looks, I can't find the answer, it doesn't come easily, I stop, I take a break. Very important. This is the same conclusion Wallace comes to. They both take breaks in which they do not think about the work. They do something mindless, something that is close to meditation. Poincaré said when he had a problem in mathematics, he would get up, put a little more wood in the fire. This is 100 years ago, all right, a little longer. Then go back to the work, just 2 or 3 minutes, 4 or 5 minutes. He comes back and it looks a little bit clearer. It doesn't automatically solve itself, but it begins to surrender and become clearer. So the writer's block is on its way to be defeated. I do this too. I'll tell you what doesn't work. When I'm writing and I have writer's block, I have writer's blocks all the time. My life is one writer's block after another, where I don't know what I'm doing, I have to stop, etc. I have learned to love them. I have learned that this is part of the creative process and stop and take a break. I do something mindless, like putting wood on the fire. I do 2 things. If I'm at home, I go in the kitchen and I wash dishes. In my house, I do the dishes. I love doing the dishes because it's time for incubation. I go into the kitchen, bring the computer there, and start to work. And there's a pile of dirty dishes everywhere. I start in, I wash 3 dishes and stop. Then I go back, do my work. For sure, 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later, there's another writer's block. I dry two of the dishes and I wash three more. I go back to my work. There's another writer's block. These are the unpleasant, boring tasks of life. They will help you incubate. When I'm done with the dishes, my work is done, two things at once. I tell people I can take a 20-minute job of dishes. The ordinary person can do it in 20 minutes. I do it in an hour and a half. It takes me longer, but I do the dishes at the same time. Before the coronavirus, we used to travel a lot and go to hotels. So I've spent a lot of my time in hotel rooms. And let me tell you what I do in hotels, my secret life in hotels. When I get into the hotel, the first thing I do is take my suitcase and put it on the bed, and I leave it. Then I go to the desk, take out the computer, open it up, and start working on the last paper. Within 2 minutes, 3 minutes, I have a writer's block. I go back to the bed, open the suitcase, take out one shirt and hang it up. That's the thing that needs to be hung up very quickly, I've discovered. I go back to my writing and, of course, more writer's blocks. Again, this is like Poincaré. I really love his paper. Do something mindless, like putting wood on the fire. If I try to work on a different paper, it doesn't work. If I do two things that involve creative energy, it doesn't work. I have to do Poincaré's idea and do something mindless. And then the subconscious will deliver the solution. I'll tell you also, I find that I can't do things that are hobbies. I have a piano at home. I love playing the piano. During the plague that we're having now, I've spent a lot of time on the piano, but I don't use it for a break. If I use it for a break, I don't want to stop. I want to keep playing the piano. And my mind doesn't incubate. I'm thinking about the music. It's like problem solving. So it has to be something genuinely mindless. Please try this out. If it works for you, do it. Albert Einstein, other scientists scheduled their day so they would have something to do mindless when they got stuck. As you know, Einstein played the violin. Other people did other things. Some people do an exercise, do your sit-ups, do your push-ups, etc. So that's another factor I think should be added to components of the composing process. Here's another one. It's called daily regular writing. I have discovered from my own experience that if I'm writing something, I have to work on it every day. If I don't, I lose my place. I don't know what I'm doing anymore. Now, Irving Wallace, a very interesting person. Irving Wallace is a fiction writer, and he's pretty good. He's written some really, really good books. He has also been interested in the composing process, and he has worked with a colleague, I think from the psychology department of his university near where he lives, and they did a study and they published it about writers and their work habits. And one of the things they found is they have daily writing. Here's the quote from Irving Wallace. The vast majority of authors keep some semblance of regular daily hours. They keep some semblance of regular daily hours. For them, it's a job, and they go there regularly. While they're working, they take breaks, I think, okay? But they make sure they show up. When they do it is different. Here's first guy I have here, Michael Chabon. Gosh, I like this guy. I've never met him, but I'm sure we get along. He's a night person, just like me. He's written some very good novels. He works from 10 at night till 4 o'clock in the morning. That's when the ideas come. Maya Angelou, wonderful, rented a hotel room near her house and would work from early morning till noon and then would stop. You must find when you're at your best. We have morning people, we have night people. I have done serious research on this. I've asked people if they're morning people or night people. And guess what I discovered? It's 50-50. It's about half. I've probably asked 500 people if they're morning people or night people. I am a night person leading a morning life, so I don't mind staying up to give this talk. Okay, some people are timekeepers, and that works. Some people are page counters. This is what Irving Wallace and his friend found. They count the number of pages and do a certain minimum every day. Then there are word counters. I'm going to do 600 words, 1,000 words, 100 words a day, and they keep to it. It doesn't matter. You find out what works for you. That is the essence of this. You find what works, you stick to it. I'll tell you what I do it, but I hesitate to do it because we really have to find our own. So I'm just giving this to you as an example. I am a word counter. My goal is to write 600 words when I'm working on a big project. If I write more than 600 words, my ideas run out. I'm stale. I can't continue. If I only write 590, I feel incomplete. So for me, 600 is perfect. If you do this every day, your work will be done before you know it. This includes revision, etc. Okay, another point I would like to add about the composing process. Let me give you the quotes before I give you the summary. First quote comes from Stephen Kane, wonderful writer and a brilliant student of writing. He says, "Don't wait for the muse. Don't wait for the creative spirit to come visit you. Your job is to make sure the muse knows where you're going to be every day." Wow. Who knows where you're from noon till 7 or noon till 3, then the muse will come. Madeleine L'Engle, brilliant writer of children's books. Inspiration usually comes during work rather than before it. So I'm going to go for a walk and see if I can come up with idea. No, it's not going to work. You've got to sit down, start to write, have a writer's block, take a short break, come back. My writing life is sitting down, trying to write, having a block, come back, start again, not going for long walks. It rarely happens. The source of inspiration is writing itself. That's where it comes. Well, regular writing is the next one. You're writing, you write regularly, that will help. And we contrast this with what is called binging. Binging is a word that comes from dieting. People go on diets and they stick to it, and then their self-discipline disappears and they do binging. They eat a lot of stuff that isn't good for them and eat it all at once. The favorite way of binging is to keep on your diet for a long time and go out and have 3 scoops of ice cream. That's binging. So here's what Boyce found out. Robert Boyce, I'd like to meet this guy sometime. He sounds very interesting. He is a professor of counseling at one of the New York universities. And his job is to counsel faculty members in their academic writing. And I've certainly read his articles. They're really interesting. Boice. And he did studies on this, which are wonderful. In one study, he compared 2 groups of faculty members who sort of themselves decided which group they were in. These are beginning faculty members, and as you know, fellow academics, beginning faculty members are under a great deal of pressure. You have to write enough papers, you submit them, and the committee evaluates them, and you get what is called tenure, like a permanent job, or you're fired, you lose your job. And once you don't get tenure, it's hard to find another job. So this is important. The pressure is intense. Well, half of these faculty members were regular daily writers. The amount of time varied, could be 40 minutes, it could be 2 hours, but they wrote every day. The other group were binge writers. Binge writers are writers who don't write every day. They wait until the conditions are perfect. People say, I won't write unless I have 5 hours. I need 5 hours to write. And I can only write where I have a comfortable chair, perfect lighting, and no noise. Automobiles outside have to go a different route. No airplanes overhead. It has to be absolutely perfect. And if I don't have my favorite cup of Persian tea, or in my case, coffee, I will not write. Well, these people never write. They never get their work done. What Boyce found was the regular writers all got tenure. The ones who were waiting for inspiration and then binged, none of them got tenure. What happened is when they sat down, they didn't know where they were. They got lost. So this is really the real problem with writer's blocks. You let it go for a day longer and you don't know where you are. The daily regular writers know where they are all the time. Charles Dickens, a great poet from Plimpton, wrote a book about writing. He said, if I missed a day of writing, I need a week of hard work, hard slog to get back into the flow. This is absolutely true for me too. If I can't write for 2 or 3 days, it takes a long time. It's like you have a big ball of string and you're trying to find the end and you can never find it and you don't know where it is in the big ball. That's the position. My son is a mathematician. He's a professor of mathematics, so is my daughter-in-law. Children succeed where their parents fail. What can I tell you? Anyway, John Tate was on the faculty at the University of Texas, where my son and daughter-in-law met, where they were students together. And he was one of the great mathematicians of the world, an algebraicist, very well respected. He died a couple of years ago. He was already in his 90s. And there was one time when the students got together and they asked him, Professor Tate, what is your typical work day? John Tate said, well, I spend about 50% of my time working hard and not getting anywhere. And maybe 10% of my time making some progress. And 40% of my time wondering how I can be so stupid, how I can be so unproductive 90% of the time. Most of his time was being angry at himself for not making progress. This is John Tate, one of the great mathematicians of the world. John Tate needed to know more about incubation, as good as he was, okay? The John Tate system, the John Tate problem is very familiar to all of us. It's me all day long. I spend half of the time working hard and it's going smoothly, and at least a good amount of the time making a tiny amount of progress, and most of the other time being stuck. Writer's block is all the time. That's what I learned from John Tate. People who think that writing, that great writers just sit down and it comes. Well, Professor Krashen, you've published 500 journal papers. It comes so easily. No, it doesn't. I understand the composing process, and I want you to have 500 papers too, if you try these ideas, okay? People think that good writers, they just sit down and the ideas flow like honey. I don't think it's true of anybody. I think we all have writer's block. And part of what I've learned on all this, and what I would like to teach everybody, is that writer's blocks are an opportunity to learn something. Being wrong is a wonderful thing. On YouTube is a recording made by Professor Ashtari, who's my guest at this talk, of a conversation I had with someone who you may have heard of, Noam Chomsky. This was last year. Noam Chomsky is still, in my opinion, the master. And we had a nice conversation. About making mistakes and being wrong. And we came to the conclusion that being wrong is wonderful. We're wrong all the time, constantly learning. The brain learns. That's what it does. And one of the ways it learns is by making mistakes, going back and correcting them In other words, revision. Dr. Chomsky and I talked about Eric Lenneberg, who got me started in this whole area of language acquisition. This was my doctoral dissertation, published before most of you were born. My dissertation was on the left and right sides of the brain, and whether it was the cause of the critical period, why children are better at language. And Lenneberg had a hypothesis, and it was very interesting. He said in the beginning, language is all over the brain. Spatial relations are all over the brain, and as you grow up, they drift to each side. Okay, and it happens all the way through childhood, and it finishes at puberty. Okay, so, and this also marks the end of our ability to acquire language to be as freely as children do. Just pick it up. After lateralization, left is the left, right is the right. We can no longer do it easily. It has to be conscious. Well, my dissertation was designed to prove Lenneberg was right. I actually proved he was wrong in several different ways. I wrote him a letter. I said, by the way, sorry to tell you this. He said, you know what? I think you're right. But I admire Lenneberg. The hypothesis was all wrong, but it pushed us forward. It was a good idea. That's where Dr. Chomsky and I agreed. There's nothing wrong with being wrong. You will your mistakes in your writing, you will discover yourself, or your students will discover them. Usually the other scholars don't take the trouble, but they are there, and it will be how you continue to make progress. So here's Campbell. Too many potential creators are inhibited by a belief that gifted others solve problems directly. We think other people just sit and it just flows. No. The difference now in my life, now that I understand this idea, I accept it. And I admire it and respect it, and I love it when I'm wrong and I have to revise. Revision is even fun because I'm about to discover something new and I know when to take breaks. Well, let me come to pedagogy, and I'll end this outrageous speech with this interesting question. Should we test writing? Writing testing is a multi-trillion dollar industry. So is testing speaking, by the way. I could leave that alone for now. Should we test writing? I'm going to say no. Let's not test it. Let's save people a lot of pain and of the effort of doing useless work. First of all, if we decide to test writing, and I've done it too, okay? This is all new for me, my understanding. If you test writing, teachers and students will want to practice writing so they'll do better on the test. Highly anxiety provoking. It'll make them very nervous. They'll be practicing writing, getting it wrong. Oh no, I'm going to do poorly on the test, etc. It's very difficult to test writing. The way we test it is you have a writing sample, you give it to 2 or 3 different people to rate, and they always disagreed. If it's a test of reading, if it's a test of listening, they can pretty well agree what the right answer is. Writing, nobody knows. Writing evaluation is not reliable. 3 different testers will give you 3 different answers. So why test it? First of all, if we test reading, we don't have to test writing because reading and writing are related. If you do lots of reading, your writing style will be okay, and we're really testing writing style. So I wouldn't bother doing it at all. I think everyone will be happy about this except for the testing companies. It takes too much time. It is not accurate. And it forces people to do something that is not going to do them any good. Writing only counts when it's a topic that you are interested in, where you'll make mistakes and correct your own mistakes through revision. Then it works. Then writing makes you smarter. That's what it's for. Let me stop here and let me open the floor for questions. I think I'm going to ask and answer the first question while people are talking about it. Dr. Krashen, thank you for your brilliant, wonderful speech. Okay. Uh, where can we find your writings on this? We would love to go right out and order your books. Well, I've got some good news for you. I'm no longer writing books. The reason I'm not writing books is that they're so expensive, no one is going to read them. And this is a profound problem that is threatening our entire profession. A friend of mine is teaching a course. Each course, 3 books are required of her students. Each one $50 American. That's a lot of money. I see the advertisements for these books. I cannot afford to buy them. Much too expensive. I found this out in the year 2007. I was invited to contribute an article on papers about input, which I was very active in, as you know. The book came out. I wrote a long article. I had a very good time with it. It cost 160 American dollars. I couldn't afford to buy extra copies for my relatives. I get a little bit of a discount. I still couldn't do it. The only people who can read these books are people who are currently at a university and have privileges at the library. So they can get Xerox copies of articles and books and they can take them out for free. That's all. Okay, journal papers. I used to subscribe. Oh, let me tell you what I'm doing about the problem with books. I've declared war on the publishers. I think the future of the profession is at stake. Books. Some of my books are for sale. If you go to, I won't mention any names, Amazon, you will find my books for sale. You can order them. I found out that if you wanted to buy a copy of Natural Approach, teaching method invented by Tracy Terrell and consistent with my work, we did a book together called The Natural Approach. My name came first, but that's alphabetical. We had a big fight over it. He really deserved it. Anyway, the book is available, $50. If you go to my website, sdkrashen.com, or you go to ResearchGate, or you follow me on Twitter, you will find that you can find it for free. I have put it on PDF form, and it's available on my website, sdkrashen.com. Principles and Practice, my first big major theoretical book done in 1982, is now listed for sale at $388. I am giving it away for free on my website, sdkrashen.com. That's my books. I have about 5 or 6 of them in PDF form, and I'm working to get the others made that way. If we don't do it, it's the end. All these books come out. I can't buy them. They look interesting. They're too much money. Okay, journal papers. I used to subscribe to about, 10 different journals because I worked in several fields in language arts, foreign language, second language. And it was okay because it cost maybe 10, 15, even 20 American dollars a year. I can do that. Now they're 150, $200. And I want to read many of them because my interests have expanded. Much of my things are in psychology journals all over. Can't be done. I am trying to solve this, to be one of many people trying to solve this. I'd like to show you what I'm doing. I now publish all my papers open access. Open access. That means the journal doesn't charge me, and the articles are free. They are on my website. You can download them for free. That's what I want to do. I think, and this is Bernie Sanders, American senator, that something that is for the common good must be available to everybody. Like formulas for vaccines, cures for diseases, make them freely available. That's what government should do. Do for its citizens what citizens cannot do. So my articles are all free. Please help yourself. share them with your friends. Also, they're short. My articles are now 2, 3, 4 pages. That's all. Most articles in journals are really dissertations, long reviews of the research, long endings, conclusion, telling people what they should do with their next study. No. If you need that, you shouldn't be reading the paper. I got my inspiration from Crick and Watson. Crick and Watson were the discoverers of the double helix, that kind of wavy diagram of DNA and RNA. I've seen their article. I downloaded it for free. It's available. It's 2 pages. If you studied biology in secondary school and you paid attention, you can understand a lot of that article. There's no excuse for the long articles. I can't read them because mostly I get bored. I fall asleep, etc. So I recommend for you, please write short articles. And if you can, make them freely available so I can read them. Otherwise, I can't. Most articles that are published today are not available. They might as well not exist. So I think we must do this if we're going to have a future. Some of you are thinking, well, I'm a junior professor. I need to publish in the prestige important journals because my university won't respect me. I understand that. My hope is that the old people like me, the senior scholars will do it. Then it will become more common and eventually it will be common practice. Okay? So can I take questions? Is that possible?
Thank you very much, Professor.
Yes.
Yeah, the session is open for the questions.
Yes. Can I ask a question?
Please.
Yeah, I'm Supian from Malaysia. I read your books earlier, your monitor theory in 1982 or 83. And I also noticed that you have written a book, but in PDF copy, and you rename it. You rename your theory, monitor theory, to second language theory.
Yes, let me tell you about that.
Oh, yeah,
Thank you
please.
for bringing that up.
Yes.
Monitor theory is a nickname.
Okay.
It's not a real name. I don't use it anymore. I used that in the early days just for fun because the monitor was the interesting part. Now when I say monitor, I'm talking about one hypothesis, the monitor hypothesis, which says we use conscious knowledge as an editor or a monitor. The important part of the theory is the comprehension hypothesis. The comprehension hypothesis says we acquire language when we understand it. But now I don't have a nickname for the theory. I simply call it language acquisition theory, because that's what it is. So no nickname, and monitor is only this one hypothesis. Thank you for bringing that up. That's a great comment.
Thank you. I would like to thank you very much for having a PDF copy, and that is free for everyone in the world. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'll do it. Thanks for your encouragement. By the way, in terms of free, what people don't know is that these books don't sell very well. Nobody makes any copies, so nobody makes any money from them. You might as well give them away.
May I ask a question, please?
Please.
Ask question.
Professor Krashen, can you hear me?
Yes, I do. I hope you can hear me.
Right. I'm one of your fans, and recently I'm doing a course by Arizona State University, TESOL course, and your name have been mentioned quite a lot of times. And my question is, you are closely associated with the comprehensive approach of 1980s. And what are your thoughts after 40 years? Thank you very much.
Well, no one is more surprised than I am that the theory had done so well. It has. And what has happened since the 1980s is this. We originally had this idea. I'll tell you how it happened. It happened when we were studying the natural order of grammatical morphemes. You may remember that. And we found that under certain conditions, you got a natural order, and other conditions you don't. It changes. And you lose the natural order when you bring in conscious learning. And this study was done with adult students of English as a second language. So I said, The adults have two systems going for them. They have this natural system that works with comprehensible input and this artificial system. That's the monitor, and then that disturbs the natural order. Soon, about the same time, colleagues of mine, Heidi Dulé and Marina Burt, found the same thing was true of children acquiring English as a second language. And they published their papers, which was very exciting. The natural order works for them. So they have comprehensible input as well, and they acquire by comprehension. By the way, I am still in contact with Marina Burt. I'm sorry, with Heidi Dulé, not with Marina. I don't know what happened to her. Heidi Dulé, I discovered on the internet. She is now an expert in nutrition. And she wrote a wonderful book, which I ordered, called Crazy Eating. The first chapter is all about coffee, so I loved it. And we have been in contact, which is very good. And she's still a brilliant intellectual. So this is very gratifying. We also found that first language works on comprehension. How do you like that? Here, the heroes are two people. A man named Kenneth Goodman and Frank Smith, both of whom passed away this last year. Frank Smith, in fact, passed away about 2 weeks ago. And I discovered their work after my theory was evolved. This was in the 80s, and it was overwhelming. Frank Smith wrote a book called Reading Without Nonsense. It says we learn to read by understanding. He had different data than I had, different evidence that came to the same conclusion. And he said it so beautifully. He said it so much better than I did. I always recommend Frank Smith's books and Kenneth Goodman books. So I'm still answering your question. The theory is growing. It grew from adult second language to child second language, and then it grew to language in first language in general. I also have some reason to hypothesize that it works for animal language. Oh my, I have an article on animal language, in fact, two of them on my website. I did a detailed article on one case, a bird, and other articles on others. We look at parrots imitating human speech, and they do it through comprehensible input, folks. They get from what they hear. It's amazing. Same thing, chimpanzees acquiring sign language. Washoe, the famous chimpanzee, lived in the state of Washington. My goodness, you look at what they did. There is some element of comprehensible input. It fits nearly perfectly, enough so that I can say it's a good hypothesis. They get it through acquisition as well. Interesting work was done on, on birds, certain species. I think I'll think of the name. Anyway, they found that on monkeys, vervet monkeys. I got the whole thing. It's here. Vervet monkeys. Vervet monkeys have alarm calls, and it depends on who attacks them. Predators are associated with various alarm calls, and the monkeys learned this. They're not born with it. For example, if a other species attacks the monkeys, and the best thing to do is climb a tree, it's a certain alarm call. If the best thing to do is hide under a bush, it's a different alarm call. They learn this, they acquire this by watching the older monkeys do it, and then later imitating them through comprehension. They don't try it out. They don't try it out and then make a mistake and get corrected. No. So it's expanded to that. The next era, of course, of research, and I mean this seriously, what happens when aliens arrive from other planets? What happens when the flying saucers actually land? Well, I got interested in this because people claim to have been abducted by flying saucers. You know, they're in their car and they suddenly doze off, and they're on a deserted highway and they find themselves in a flying saucer. They're taken away. Man, I hope that happens to me because I want to know what they're talking about. I would have a lot of questions, okay? Anyway, it's all telepathy, everybody. Sorry, there's no room for us when it comes to the aliens, apparently. But I found one exception. I got 3 different reports of alien abductions. And the people who were abducted onto the flying saucer, when they got back, they drew what they saw in the spaceship. And they drew diagrams of what they saw. The diagrams were quite similar. I don't know if it's the diagram of the machines or of the language, but something's going on there. And I think it's worth studying. Absolutely. I don't dismiss any of this. I don't dismiss flying saucers as hoax. They may be, they may not be, but we have to have an open attitude. So the theory, the comprehension hypothesis, going back to the question, is very much alive. We are still finding evidence that it works for second language child, second language adults, and first language adults. And we're seeing pieces of evidence in other species. We're seeing pieces of evidence, even thoughts maybe something's going on with other civilizations, with other life forms. So it's done very well, and we're still keeping track.
Can I ask, sir, please?
Sure.
I'm Mohammed Zuri from Morocco.
Oh, we're getting a bad connection. I can't hear you very well.
I'm Mohammed Zuri from Morocco.
Not getting it. Sorry.
Excuse me, can you write the question in the chat box so we can, because your voice is cutting up.
Yeah. I don't even see
Okay,
it.
Professor Krashen, I collect some questions from the chat box.
Good. And you will,
Okay,
you will recite it. Thank you.
One of the questions is, how can we enhance the reading skill in language learning? Can you hear me? Could you hear me?
Yes, but I didn't hear one word. You said, how can I enhance?
How can we enhance the reading skill in
Reading.
language
Okay.
learning?
Okay. Well, the easy answer, and I'll make it more complicated, is reading. Of course, reading things that are interesting and comprehensible. So for the moment, I'm not going to talk about the script. I'm not going to talk about learning to read in another script. I'm only talking about, let's say, someone wants to improve reading in English as a second language and has learned the alphabet already. It's going to come with easy, compelling stories. I want to answer this question by telling you what I've been doing at home. I have been home. I've been stuck at home. I don't go out. Our daughter has forbade us to go out, and I'm taking that very, very seriously. And it's nice. I like quarantine. I like being at home. It's not going to end. It's going to go on for a long time, and that's the way it is. So let me tell you what I'm doing at home. I know that you think that's not the question, but I'm answering it that way. I've been playing the piano. I told you I've been exercising. I'm home alone with my girlfriend. We've only been married for 55 years, so it's still young and early and fresh. So that's good. I've also been reading. Now, I know several languages, but I've chosen one that I'm intermediate in. This is not my best language. I've chosen Spanish. I'm working on Spanish. Actually, I'm having a good time. I have a collection of books in Spanish that are easy Spanish readers, graded readers. I've been reading those easy books every day. Now, every Friday, I'm not speaking Spanish, not very much. I'm at home. I go to the supermarket early Friday morning, where there's a special time for old people to shop. It's the only time I go out. And the first time I went there, I brought my groceries so that I could pay for them. The man who took them had a Spanish name, Fidel. So I spoke to him in my intermediate Spanish. He answered in English. So I said in Spanish, I said, my goal is to speak Spanish very well. I want to speak Spanish as well as you do, which is true. You can help me, please. He spoke Spanish to me. We have been speaking Spanish every week for the last 3 months. but only for 1 minute at a time. That's not very much. And I have noticed something about Fidel. I got the right guy. He is so pleasant, so cooperative. He tells me jokes. We gossip. He's speaking more quickly. And he's telling me things that he normally wouldn't tell people. It's more complicated too. He can sense that I'm getting better. 3 days ago, and Dr. Ashtari, who's in the audience tonight, witnessed this. We had a conversation with a Spanish-speaking colleague, bilingual, in Arizona, no, in Texas. And I spoke Spanish to her just for fun. She said, "Stephen, you've gotten so much better. What are you doing?" It was the reading. The reading helps everything. When you read, you get better in reading, but you get better in speaking as well. You get better in everything. Now, credit where credit is due. I got this idea from a colleague, Beniko Mason, who is a former professor that is now retired in Japan, who taught English as a foreign language. In her program, the beginning method was listening to stories, which she told students and made them comprehensible. That led to reading, and they read lots and lots of very, very easy books. When you took your first English class, there was a reading section. But the second one was really hard, and the third one was impossible because all the new vocabulary and grammar. We keep it easy. I read beginner's texts, low intermediate texts, etc. It's comfortable and it's easy. Dr. Mason put together a library of 5,000 graded readers. That's what we need to do. So students could read and select reading themselves, which makes it comprehensible. Yes, should they read off the computer? Sure, absolutely. I think that helps as well. Great question. Thanks for asking.
Mr. Professor Stephen Krashen, I have a very interesting question that why feelings need words to express?
I have no idea.
It's a very interesting question.
No idea. But they sure do. Isn't it wonderful? Yeah, we have so many feelings we can't do it with just gestures. I really don't know. Great question. I'll ask it on Twitter, see if anybody answers.
I was wondering if I can ask you one question.
Yes. I'm wondering about the incubation period. Do you think at the cognitive level it will be different for second language learners?
And say this again more slowly. Say it again
I'm
more slowly.
wondering about the incubation period that you have talked about. Would it be different for a person who is, yes, would it be different at the cognitive level for a student who's learning a second language for ESL learners?
I doubt it. Now, the incubation I presented as a help to general problem solving and writing. I don't know if we need it for language acquisition, but I've never thought of it. That's a wonderful question. Thank you. I guess incubation would be the silent period.
Hello, Mr. Krashen. I was wondering if I can ask you one question.
Yes.
You were talking about your friend, this Spanish guy who talked Spanish, and you were talking also as well about the comprehension hypothesis, and I was wondering if it's useful or meaningful to take this into consideration when teaching English as a foreign language or any other language. Do you see like it could be possible to be teaching in this way?
Of course, we want our input to be comprehensible to students. That was the breakthrough of Tracy Terrell. He taught Spanish to beginners, and it was all completely comprehensible. He used pictures, he used body language, occasional translation, and that's how language acquisition is done well. The idea of comprehensible input has remained, as you know. It has not always been in one way. Dr. Mason has had enormous success with stories, beginning stories. In fact, I'm going to take a little detour and tell you I think the basis, the breakthrough in language, has been the use of stories. Stories are the way we acquire first and second language. Dr. Mason tells students stories. She tells stories of universal interest like fairy tales. And then that's followed by reading mostly fiction. The best input we can get, the best comprehensible input we can get for intermediate students is self-selected fiction. Fiction is quite complicated. It contains all the academic words, everything you're ever going to need, and gives you insight into other people. It's absolutely wonderful. So yes, I think comprehension is the answer. And the part of comprehension that works the best for us as language teachers is stories, otherwise known as fiction. Great question. Thanks.
I'd like to make a comment, if possible.
Please.
Please, Professor, I had a chance in 1984 to read your books in Havana, First Language Acquisition and First Language Learning. And to my surprise, here I've been living in Russia for about 10 years. And my students at the university did not know about your work. I introduced them this year to your work, and together with Chomsky's language acquisition device, and they are receiving language learning from a different perspective. I can account that you can try to learn language, but acquisition is possible even when you are an adult. I am 61 years old, and I speak Russian through acquisition. I cannot write it very much, but I can speak it. And this is a fact. And thanks everything to comprehensible input received in the family and especially from my children. Thank you.
Yes. Have you tried reading?
I've tried reading. Graded readers. I don't have much time, but it does work.
Okay.
I'm sure about that. I'm pretty
That'll
sure
be nice.
about saying that this is a fact. With me, at least.
Very good.
Professor, we have another question. In language acquisition, should we begin with listening and speaking first or reading?
Okay. Begin with input. Don't begin with output. Speaking, we allow to emerge on its own. When we push speaking too hard, when we force speaking, it doesn't help. The students don't get better and they get very, very nervous. Speaking is derived. It's input. With lots of input, lots of listening and lots of reading, speaking will come on its own. There are many studies that show this to be the case. Studies of language acquisition in other cultures, people are quiet. They don't talk right away. They have a silent period. Then when they feel ready, they start to talk. This has been shown in the research again and again. I would not begin with students speaking. I would begin with listening and reading, and speaking will emerge. Similarly, I wouldn't start with students writing. That will come later. Okay, good. That's all I'll say for now. Good question.
All right, thank you very much. There will be a feedback form, a feedback link, in fact. So all the participants are requested to give the feedback. So I think there are no more questions.
May I ask a question? I do have one.
Yes.
Hello, Professor Krashen. I'm Abir. I've been a teacher of English for like almost 20 years. My question is, shall we start teaching young students writing as early as possible, even if they are still non-proficient readers?
No, I would let writing alone. I would leave it alone. And my prediction is if they read enough, they're going to start writing. You won't have, you'll have to teach much, much less because they will have acquired it. I would do lots of reading, lots of listening, and delay writing. I just finished an article, I got an article published in one of the journals, one that I can still afford, foreign language journals. And the argument was about American students learning to read in Chinese. And my interpretation of the data was that don't do it right away. If you do it later, it happens at the same rate. You get the same results without rushing, without being in a hurry. Let them listen, let them read, and it'll be much, much easier. Delay writing as long as you can.
Thanks a lot, Professor. Thank you for your valuable answer.
Hello?
Excuse me, sir. Could I ask some questions, please? I have a question. And I raised my hand long, but you didn't see me. Yes, sir.
Yeah, yes, please. Who is this?
Yes, yes, I want just to ask a question about the low achiever. Could you recommend us some ways or strategies for dealing with low achievers in writing?
Okay, low achievers in general are usually slower. That's all. That's only a problem for how we organize schools. You know, you should be at a certain level at a certain age. People are different. The language acquisition device works subconsciously. You can't hurry it up. All we do is supply the best input. Make sure the input is comprehensible. Make sure it is engaging. It is extremely interesting. Make sure there's a lot of it and the language is rich. The best input possible. And people will acquire at somewhat different rates, but not terribly different. They're not going to be identical, though. We can't expect students to be, it's like saying when all students are 9 years old, they're all going to be at the exact same height, and they're all going to weigh exactly the same. No, there's going to be some variation no matter what we do. We have to be more tolerant. If they're continuing to improve, who cares? The goal of a language class is not to make students perfect. The goal of the language class is to bring students to the point where they can improve on their own, to make them intermediates. For example, my Spanish. I don't need a Spanish class. I need to read on my own, occasional conversation. That's it. And I have reached the intermediate stage, in other words. That's what we want. And people are going to vary how fast they're going to make it. But after a few hundred hours, everybody will be there, not to worry. I think we've created the problem in most cases.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, dear Professor Mr. Krashen. It's a pleasure to be with all such wonderful colleagues. My question is about to the child who develops more than 3 languages at the same time as regarding the writing skill. As you know, that the fine motors for the kid who is from 3 or 4 to 5 years or 6 years is still not undeveloped. How about your opinion or your strategy to develop more than writing system for more than languages? As you know, for example, Arabic versus English or Mandarin, such things are very incredible for the child. Even he has the ability to draw and to imitate these letters or graphs. Thank you so much.
Well, I'm not really worried about how quickly they get them. I'm only concerned that the input is available to them. I'm not in a hurry for them to get more than 1 or 2 languages, suddenly. Make sure the input is comprehensible. Make sure it's interesting. Let's take our
Yes.
time, and
Yes.
it's all going to come. And guess what? There's no age limit. Adults
Yes.
can do it at any time. My colleague, Steve Kaufman, is very admired. He's a polyglot, 20 languages. He has acquired, I think, 6 of them after age 62. The language acquisition device does not turn off. We should not
Yes.
be in a hurry with children. I'm working on Spanish. I'm 79. I'm making good progress. Even my friend says my Spanish is better now. What happens when you're an adult? What happens when you're an adult? You may not be perfect. You'll only have 99.9%, like most of you do with English. No big deal. Who
Thank you
cares?
so much.
Okay.
Professor, could I ask my last question?
Sure.
You were saying about, well, we were talking about some stuff about reading, and I was like, from everything that you said, I was wondering if this theory, the exposure theory that Noam Chomsky created, uh, do you think it's like, I know it's quite meaningful because that's the way how you acquire at some point fluency, and of course, uh, it gets you through the language as well. But do you think that reading will get you the fluency that you need in order to speak the language that you're learning?
Okay, you get a high mark for the question.
Yeah.
And you get extra credit because we really don't know how far you can go with reading. And it would be wonderful if people started working on it. I know reading alone has been profitable for me. The languages I speak well, most of it has come from reading. Absolutely. I don't think it's not going to give you the right accent, but if you have a sufficient amount of oral input, reading is going to help you enormously. It'll give you everything except pronunciation. And if you get at least some pronunciation, I find in my case, my German comes largely, German is my best second language. And I've got it mostly through reading, but I've had a fair amount of oral input. Enough. Not as much as reading, but enough so that I sound okay. So the reading really does help. Once you get a sufficient amount of oral input, reading will keep taking you farther and farther and farther. We have not pushed reading hard enough. The biggest recommendation is increase access to books and magazines and anything written for our students. Okay?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Professor Krashen, I have one question.
Okay.
Do you still keep the language acquisition and language learning separated? Do you still believe that they cannot take place simultaneously? And based on your experience, Spanish experience, it seems that you pick up the language faster or easier outside classroom. You never attended any Spanish class.
What is universal is comprehensible input. That's what's universal. It doesn't matter if it's in a classroom or in the outside world. Acquisition and learning are still very different. Most of our language competence comes from acquisition through comprehensible input. I have been lucky. I've been able to get some of it outside the classroom. Others I've gotten in the classroom. They are still very, very different. Learning does not become acquisition. The Spanish that has helped me is not my knowledge of Spanish grammar. Let me give you an example. Although I know lots of Spanish grammar, okay? In Spanish, as we know in all languages, some rules are early acquired, some are late acquired, and you can't change the order. There's nothing you can do. It comes when it comes. I'll give you one example. The verb to be in Spanish. I'm hungry, I'm tired, I'm handsome, I'm ugly, all those things. That has two forms. One form is ser, the other is estar. I have learned the rule. I know it very well. I still make mistakes on ser and estar. I make mistakes all the time. I never know which one is right. I have not acquired it yet. I can only read it. It will come as I hear more Spanish because it's late acquired. I'm better off not thinking about the rule. I had this wonderful experience I have to share with you. This is thanks to Steve Kaufman. I was going to Mexico. I was about to spend a week at a language school, the Phoenix School, where I have friends. And I was going to speak in one of their seminars. The people came from all over for the seminar. I gave my speeches in English. But I stayed at the home where many of the teachers lived. And I had lunch and dinner with the faculty at the language school. Steve Kaufman gave me this wonderful advice. He said, don't worry about your mistakes. Nobody cares. They're more interested in what you are saying, not how you're saying it. Listening to Steve, my counselor, I decided not to worry about ser and estar at all. Just say whatever I said, just let it come. I had such a good time. It increased my fluency. We had wonderful gossip sessions for afternoon and evening for 10 days, over a week. It was so much fun. I must have gained an enormous amount of Spanish, but I didn't know because it was all happening subconsciously. I'm sure my Spanish got much, much better. That's the idea. Don't worry about grammar when you're talking. Grammatical accuracy will not come from grammar. It will come from the comprehensible input that you got from your friend, from what you've heard and what you've read. Okay?
Well, I think it's the time to close the
Professor,
session.
I have one more question.
Okay, last question. This is the last question. Please go ahead.
Yes, Professor, how can we minimize first language interference in our EFL writing classes?
Okay, good question. Good questions are those I know the answer to. First language interference. By the way, this explanation we are given by Leonard Newmark, who turned out, I discovered late in life, we share an aunt and an uncle. Isn't that wonderful? Anyway, Leonard Newmark thought this up. He does brilliant work because I agree with him. He said first language comes when you're trying to say something, but you haven't acquired the structure yet. So you fall back on your first language. So you want to say something, you want to use a relative clause. You use the structure in your first language because it's the only one you've got. It goes away by itself. As you acquire more of the language, you have less interference because you don't need the first language structure. Instruction is not going to help. First language interference falls away, dies, as you acquire more of the second language. You won't need the artificial crutch. Thank you, Leonard Newmark.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Stephen Krashen. Thank you, all the participants. The feedback link is given in the chat box. All the participants are requested to please fill it up. I would like to end the session with Professor Stephen Krashen's words, something for the common good must be available to all. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
It's a beautiful selection. Very good.
Thank you very much. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Me very benefit from it. Thanks, sir. Thanks. Goodbye.
Thank you very much, all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Professor. Thank you.